Welcome to The Connecting Point.
I'm Robert Carter. I'm going to spend more time in the main service explaining myself and the ministry that I work for. I don't have nearly enough time to get through the 20 hours of material that I have for you on dinosaurs, so I'm going to have to abbreviate parts of this talk. My goal here is just to ask you a bunch of questions and then see if we together can answer the questions biblically. The goal is to see if the Bible really is a good source of history and science. Now, if it's not, then we have some questioning to do afterwards. But of course, any lawyers in here? Any trained lawyer in this room? Oh, look at that. Lawyers can't be Christians? In law school, lawyers are told never ask a question they don't already know the answer to. So, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Some of them are going to be hard. On purpose, because you're going to hear these hard questions out there, and you might be like, how do I answer that? So I'm going to do it on purpose. Okay, you ready? Some of the questions are going to be tricky, deliberately. Let's see if you're thinking like an evolutionist or not. And some of them are going to be easy. My goal is to get to the end, and the end is, did birds evolve from dinosaurs? Did dinosaurs have feathers? You hear that a lot, right? So I'm going to get to that. So let's start. Which of these creatures have been on Earth the longest? The bird, the dinosaur, the dolphin, or the fish? Who says fish? Great, you're all good evolutionists. Oh, I told you I was going to start with a trick question. I didn't say start with one. I said it was going to be a trick question. I started with one. Now, of course, evolutionary theory says the fish came first. Then dinosaur or reptiles evolved from fish eventually. And then mammals and birds evolved from reptiles. That's straight up Darwinian theory. But look at the question itself. It's a leading question. The question is assuming that some of the creatures have been on Earth longer than others. So we have to train ourselves when we hear something to question the question. What does the Bible say about this? Well, the Bible tells us that God created the universe over 6 consecutive days. And on the 5th day of creation, he would have created the fish, the pelican, and the dolphin. In the 6th day of creation, he would have created the land animals, which should have included dinosaurs. Now, we don't yet know if that's true. I'm assuming that in this audience, there's a diversity of opinion on this, because we're people, and people have different ideas. But let's walk through this and see if could possibly reflect reality. Okay? Now, before we get there, though, we have to define what a dinosaur is. What's a dinosaur? When I was a kid, you know those stories in the Old Testament about people living for hundreds of years? Yeah, I believe that. I didn't back then, but I believe it now. But what would happen if an iguana lived for like 800 years? Could that explain the dinosaurs? Really, really, really big reptiles? Actually, the answer is no, because we have dinosaurs, a lot of dinosaurs, from the adult to the juvenile to the baby. A baby Tyrannosaurus Rex looks like a big Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's just smaller. Iguanas, turtles, alligators, all the reptiles you're familiar with, except snakes because they don't have legs, but all the reptiles you're familiar with, their legs stick out to the side. Dinosaurs, like you, could stand up. 2 legs or 4 legs, they bore their weight on their legs. That's what a dinosaur is. It's a very distinctive, characteristic group of reptiles, and they're different than the other reptiles. The funny thing is, though, that buried with dinosaurs are all of the reptiles that you're familiar with that are alive today. Snakes, crocodiles, monitor lizards, tons of turtles, because turtles are easy to find. They got that great shell that's made of bone, it preserves well, and they're kind of easy to see in a rock, where if it was just a skeleton, it's harder to see. So we have lots of turtle fossils. So we're faced with a giant enigma. What happened to the dinosaurs? What's the big story we hear in the news media? Big meteor, right? Hit the earth. Does anyone know how long ago that was in the evolutionary time frame? 65 million years ago. Now, I don't think the earth is that old, okay? I'm just using the evolutionary number. They say 65 million years ago, big meteor hit the earth, caused so much dust to go up into the atmosphere, it cooled the earth, killed off all the plants, and the dinosaurs went extinct. Interesting story. How come the snakes and the turtles and the crocodiles survived? Worse, how did the butterflies survive? Yeah, do you know we have butterfly fossils from the dinosaur era? Yeah. The answer is nobody knows the answer to this. I don't know why the dinosaurs are extinct. I think I have some ideas. I don't know because I don't have a time machine. I can't go back in time and analyze what happened to them. And this is the status of science today. We are not time lords. We only know what we know today. But how many types of dinosaurs are there? Who can name a species of dinosaur? Tyrannosaurus. Triceratops? Brontosaurus. How about Montanoceratops or Styracosaurus or Pachyrhinosaurus? You think you can name those? Yeah, I bet we could take 2 or 3 10-year-olds in this room and everybody else, and I bet they can name more dinosaurs than everybody else could. But together, do you think we might be able to name 20 species? Maybe? How many species of dinosaurs were there? Well, here's 11. In fact, that's 11 different genera of ceratopsids. Problem is, I don't know how many species there are. I'm a biologist, by the way. What's my definition of what a species is? If 2 things can interbreed, they're the same species, which is why lions and tigers are the same species. But to a geologist, if 2 things look different, they're different species. There's different definitions of that word depending upon which branch of science you're in. I don't know what species are up on the screen because they're all dead. I don't have them in a zoo. I can't do breeding experiments. Again, science is left with an unanswerable question. However, we can get into this a little more. How many species are standing here on the grass? That is the world's largest dog standing next to the world's smallest dog. 1 species. In fact, these are gray wolves. Not red wolves, gray wolves. We know where dogs came from because we've sequenced the genomes of dogs from all over the world, all these different breeds, and they all go back to gray wolves. Look what we can do with a wolf. And these breeds didn't exist 100 years ago. Okay, do species change, yes or no? Absolutely. Look, is that evolution? No, because we haven't actually done anything except morphed on a common theme. We haven't turned it into something non-dog-like. So yes, species change. We got to accept that. It is true. Is evolution true? Well, evolution is defined as common ancestry, not change. Sorry, that's my next talk. Come back Wednesday night for more on that. Wednesday night. All right, so looking at this, let's apply the idea that there's lots of species in the fossil record to the thought that we know that there's a lot of diversity within species. Apply that to the fossil record, and you know what? There's only about 50 basic kinds of dinosaur. About. You're familiar with them. You have already seen most of the diversity within dinosaurs with your exposure to dinosaurs so far. And it's not hard, actually, to get a grip on most of the diversity within the dinosaurs. We got the ankylosaurs and the duck-billed hadrosaurs and the ceratopsids I just showed you, the stegosaurs, the theropods, the sauropods. But the theropods are our challenge because the theropods are the meat eaters. All those horrible movies about dinosaurs eating people and rampaging across the world. You ever realize that most dinosaurs were not meat eaters? Most dinosaurs are plant eaters. But the theropods, that's the ones with the big back legs and the little front legs. Yeah, those are the meat eaters. That's our challenge. Man. I'll say that joke in a minute. That joke goes somewhere else. Look at Tyrannosaurus rex. Look at his long teeth. How would he have originally been described? As an herbivore? A carnivore? A scavenger? Or an omnivore? That is, does he eat plants? Does he eat meat? Does he eat roadkill? Or does he eat whatever he wants? Who says carnivore, the fierce predator stalking the Mesozoic plains. Great. You're good evolutionists. Question the question. Originally described according to whom? The evolutionary paleontologists discovered him in the 1800s and named him Tyrant Lizard King, or the Bible? What does the Bible have to say about whether or not things ate plants or meat? Well, it says actually something very shocking. God talking to Adam. I've given you every herb that yields seed which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. Okay, so people were created to eat plants. But also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so. Okay, let me ask you, Christian, does the Bible unequivocally say that God created all animals to eat plants? Yes. Uh-oh. We know that some dinosaurs were eating meat. We know that they're carnivores today. Is that a biblical problem? When Charles Darwin looked at the fossil record, he said, how could a good and loving God have created that? Because he saw broken bones and cancer and crunched up dead things and other things' stomachs. He saw a lot of horrible things and rejected the God of the Bible. But what was he looking at? Was he looking at creation? No, he was looking at the effects of the fall that happened after creation. See, Adam reached out and he took the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, according to Genesis. And after that, God tells him, because you've listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the sweat of you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, and etc. This is called the curse. It's a very important passage for biblical Christianity because this explains how God could have created something with no sin, suffering, or death, and yet we see sin, suffering, and death today. But this doesn't just apply to people. It applies to the entire universe, and dinosaurs are part of that universe. Surprise, surprise, though. Paleontology has changed. Be very careful with science. Don't trust scientists. Because we change our mind. And it is really amazing to see a scientist stand up there. We now know. By the way, that's a catchphrase for yesterday I was wrong. There's another scientific catchphrase. We have no evidence to suggest. That means I've never run the experiment. Oh, you must understand. We are trained. I'm a scientist. We are trained to use very crafty language. The language we're trained to use the words we use is such that if tomorrow we're wrong, we never have to admit that we were wrong. What a powerful thing that is, to have words like that in one's vocabulary. Man, the things I was trained and taught, like let's say 1970s when I was growing up, the things that I was taught, nobody believes today on most aspects of science, except Newton and the laws of physics and Einstein. Most everything else is like, that was wrong. Most everything we think is true today is not. It's just we don't know what's wrong. Probably half of what we think in science is actually not correct. But do you think the scientists who figure it out are going to lose their jobs? No, because of the language that they use. But there's a little aside for a science lesson. Let's look at dinosaurs. Paleontology has gone through a major shift over specifically the last decade. We have realized that very often buried with the bones are what are called ghost fossils. That is, you can see the outline of the animal's body in the rocks as a discoloration, which means he was buried alive. Very often you can see a preservation of his internal organs, like his heart or his liver or his stomach. And there's some bone beds in the world, world-class bone beds that were destroyed 100 years ago because the paleontologists just wanted to get the big dinosaurs out. They chisel the rocks away and throw all this rock and just get the bones and put it up in the museum. They dug right through all the little dinosaurs, They dug right through all the mammals. By the way, we have as many mammal species buried with dinosaurs as we have dinosaur species. Did you know that? And they dug right through all the ghost fossils. So now people are going back to these fragments and trying to pick apart what this guy did 100 years ago and weeping, in scientific, oh, I can't believe he did this. And looking at these world-class things that were phenomenal fossils destroyed because of the misunderstanding of what was actually in the rocks. But when scientists have now gone back and they looked at the stomach contents of the theropods, that's the meat eaters, they found out that most of the theropods' stomachs are packed with plant materials. Wait, I thought those pointy teeth meant they're carnivores. Black bears and polar bears have the same teeth. What do black bears eat? They're almost strict herbivores. What do polar bears eat? They're almost strict carnivores. And the brown bears in between, they eat berries, they eat salmon, they eat what they want. They have the same tool set. The same teeth, the same claws, the same eyes, the same hair, about the same size. Now the hair is different colors. Whoop-de-doo. That's one of the easiest genes to mutate and not kill an organism. I can prove it. Look at all you white faces in here. This is the mutation on the end of chromosome 15. We know what gene it is. We know what letter changed. It's a mutation. I am a mutant. And so all of you people with European ancestry. Does it make you uncomfortable? Well, we can make that same argument for any racial group in the world. Everyone is a mutant. Every population carries different mutations, though. It just happens that this one affected the skin color of the Europeans. So look at polar bears. What is that? It's a mutation. They lost the ability to produce melanin. It's an adaptive mutation. It helps them to survive in the Arctic. You don't want to be a black bear on white ice trying to chase a seal into a hole. But then again, you don't want to be a white bear in a forest because the rabbits will be like, oh, here comes a bear. So we now know most dinosaurs are vegetarians despite what they look like. And we have an answer of what happened to the dinosaurs after creation. Well, some of them left their initially created way of doing things because meat is a lot of food. It's tasty and it's nutritious. I think the same thing happened to bears as they're spreading out from Ararat, the Ararat region, after Noah's flood. But that's a whole other story. Man, I'm just opening up all these Pandora's boxes of ideas without actually answering enough things. But that's kind of what this is like. It's like a freight train riding through a massive library of information. You grab one little book and you can read it and it's swept out of your hands, and you grab another one. There's so much information that we have, it's even hard to know where to start. So let me throw you another bit of information. That is a tooth of a Tyrannosaurus rex embedded in the tailbone of a duck-billed dinosaur. And the hole healed up around the tooth. So not only did the duck-billed dinosaur survive a Tyrannosaurus rex attack, it probably walked around the rest of his life in a tremendous amount of pain. That's sad, isn't it? But that's the fossil record. Now wait a second. If dinosaurs were created with Adam and Eve, and if they really were on the earth, I mean, that's crazy to think about, isn't it? That would mean that they would have been around during Noah's flood. Paleontologists, when they look at a dinosaur, do they say, hey, this guy died in a watery catastrophe? Did they ever say that? Well, actually, yeah, but they don't tell you it. You've seen pictures like this. I know you've seen pictures like this because this is the classic pose of most intact dinosaurs. When we find them in a rock, they're in that position. You've seen it before. In fact, the first Jurassic Park movie, the opening scene, they do a boom in the ground, up on a computer screen magically appears a velociraptor in that position. When your cat or a squirrel or a cow dies outside, do they do that? No. That's a really weird pose. For a long time, people said, oh, these animals were suffocated. And as they're going, and then they died and preserved that way. But when you're dead, your body is floppy. It doesn't do that. So some scientists, about 2 summers ago, published a paper. They realized that if you take a dead chicken and put it in water, it does that. For long-necked animals and long-tailed animals, there's a structure in the body. It's called the ligamentum elasticum, the elastic ligament. It's a rubber band that runs from the base of the skull down the spine, and if they have a tail, down the tail. It's a big rubber band, so if you're a dinosaur, you don't have to have these muscles to hold your head up. You got a big springy thing, so boinga, 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 boinga. That's really smart. But if you're in water, you don't weigh as much, right? If you take that animal with that tension on that spring on the back of his body and drown it, it doesn't weigh as much. It doesn't have the muscles to hold itself down. And so what happens? The body would naturally go, broing. So now most evolutionary paleontologists are saying that it's called the epistotonic pose is evidence of a land animal that drowned. Okay, Mr. Evolutionary Paleontologist, how come we have tens of thousands of land dinosaurs that drown? That's a good question. You might expect to find one or two, but you'd expect most of them to have died on land, but they didn't. Okay, next question. Is the word dinosaur in the Bible? Yes or no? You have a Bible translation that says dinosaur? No. The word is not in the Bible. I wouldn't expect it to be in the Bible for two reasons. One, it wasn't invented until the middle 1800s, and the Bible had already been in English for a long time before that, multiple translations. Second, in 1859 was the origin of species, and the world changed at that point. Now, it would be unfair to put the word dinosaur in the Bible, because then you'd actually be replacing the perfectly functional Hebrew word tanin, which if you read in modern translations is sometimes translated jackal, sometimes translated sea monster. Translators don't know what to do with this in general. But when you look at the usage of this word, it seems to be the Hebrew word for dragon. All major cultures across the world had words to describe gigantic reptilian creatures. Now, if I was inventing a story to scare my grandkids, I would talk about the 50-foot tall wolf that came and ate the village, because I would have been familiar with wolves. I wouldn't think of this little teeny fence lizard that would grow to eat the village. That would make no sense. And yet, we've got stories like this from all over the world. Now, in the Bible itself, there are some very strange things. Now, I'm not saying Job 40 is talking about an Ankylosaurus. I just stuck the picture there because I like the picture. In the Bible, let us read what God tells Job. He just finishes, Job, do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know? Job's about to say, I put my hand over my mouth. He cannot answer God. But God's talking about all these sciencey sort of things that you know are true, snow and ice and clouds and stuff. And then he says, behold, behemoth. Is that an English word, behemoth? So what are we trained? We should be trained. When we see a non-English word in the Bible, we should say, okay, what does that word mean? Well, the word means a beast of beasts. Behold the beast of beasts, which I made as I made you. I think that's a reference to Creation Week, day 6. He eats grass like an ox. He's an herbivore. He's got strength in his loins and power in the muscles of his belly. He's a really strong animal, and he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. King James says he hangs his tail like a cedar. Take any translation you want. I've looked at 10 of them now. They all say like a cedar. So he's got a tail like a cedar. There's cedar trees that grow around here. Are they very impressive? They're little scrubby things. But if you look at the cedar trees of the Middle East, they're the largest trees in the Middle East. There's 40 different trees mentioned in Scripture. Palm, acacia, myrtle, olive, cedar. God could have chose any one of them if he meant it's stiff like wood, strong like wood. He said, in an American context, he's got a tail like a sequoia. You know exactly what that means, don't you? Doesn't mean it's as big as a sequoia. It means he's got the biggest tail you can imagine. Now, I don't know, scientifically, you cannot know that Job 40 is describing sauropod dinosaurs. But if you wanted to look through the fossil record and amongst living animals, there is one animal that deserves the title beast of beasts, the largest land animals God created. He's an herbivore. He's really strong. and he's got a gigantic tail. Cool. Look what I did. I can't answer the question, but I made a case for it, didn't I? Yeah, that actually, scientists, we have to do that a lot. We don't know the answer to most things. So what we do, we build up a case for it. And I think that's a pretty good case. I just can't prove it. Now, next question. How do we fit dinosaurs on Noah's Ark? Does Noah have a problem? Well, actually, let me answer this question in 3 possible ways. First of all, within each kind of dinosaur, there are big species and little species. Microceratops was smaller than I'm going to say smaller than a pony. And then Triceratops would stretch from here to the sound booth and was not quite that tall, but really, that thing was huge. You've got big Tyrannosaurus Rex-like things and smaller versions that grew full size but only been that tall within that kind of dinosaur. God brought the animals to Noah. He didn't have to take great-great-granddaddy Apatosaurus. He could have taken a smaller version. He could have taken a juvenile. He could have taken a teenager. Now, I don't think he took eggs on board because that's not what the Bible says, but all dinosaurs did hatch from eggs, and the biggest dinosaur egg ever discovered is smaller than an ostrich egg. Oh. So some animal that would have a hard time fitting in this room was, when he was born, not longer than this if he was wrapped up inside the shell. Oh. But not only that, how many dinosaurs would Noah have had to take on the ark? He had to take 2 of each kind of animal, right? How many basic kinds of dinosaurs are there? About 50. What's 50 times 2? 100. And even if he had to take the largest ones, 100 dinosaurs could easily fit on board that vessel with room to spare, plus the food and the water that all the animals needed for a year-long voyage. Cool, huh? So we really don't have a problem, but we can make it easier if Noah took smaller versions or younger versions. But wait a second, what happened to the dinosaurs? We heard that all the dinosaurs went extinct. But let me throw something at you. What if Noah took the big dinosaurs on board the ark? What if I told you that I predict that large animals always tend to go extinct? There are good reasons for this. If you're big, you have to eat a lot of food. You can't survive climate cycles. If you're big, you have to wait till you reproduce. You're more likely to die before you have babies. If you're large, you're always at a greater threat of extinction than if you're small. Elephants will probably go extinct one day. Mice never will. That right there might explain what happened to the dinosaurs. I don't know what happened to them. I just don't believe they're around today. But just some ideas for you. And yet, if dinosaurs live with man, crazy as that might seem, we might expect some evidence for it. Is there any evidence for it? Well, yes. Some of the evidence that people like to share, I don't like. I don't think it's good enough. Some of it's equivocal. Sometimes I think it's a little wishful thinking. But let me give you some of the best evidences that I've seen. This is the tomb of a bishop that died in England 600 years ago. You can see that there's a rectangle around his tomb. And in that rectangle is carved all these animals. Look, there's a bat. There's a dog. There's a fish. There's a bird. Does anyone disagree with me? Not only that, that's a pretty specific breed of dog. I think that's a carp, and that bird is a wading bird. Whoever drew these things knew enough about animals to draw a pretty specific type of animal, right? Now, the bat's not a very good one because bat fingers don't do that. They all radiate from the elbow, actually from the wrist. But it's pretty good. Nearby this is this. That looks like 2 sauropod dinosaurs with their necks wrapped around each other. And the guy on the left has spikes on his tail. There's only one species of sauropod dinosaur that we found that has spikes on his tail. Oh. And then nearby that is this. No, I don't know what this is. It's not a pig. In fact, it looks similar to, some people say, a stegosaurus without the spikes on his back. Other people have suggested it's more like a different species of dinosaur, which I like better. I don't remember what the name is at the moment. But it's a very strange thing to have carved into a floor right next to a greyhound. And this image, this motif of two sauropod dinosaurs with their necks wrapped around each other is really common in ancient history. In fact, proportionally, these guys are shaped like Tanistropheus. What's the chance that you would invent a mythological animal that have a really good correspondence to a known species of extinct animal? About zero. And yet we find depictions of artwork, some really strange things that have a really good correspondence to things we know were once alive. In the jungles of Cambodia, there's this massive temple complex. This is literally 1,000 years old. This is centuries before we supposedly discovered dinosaurs. And carved into this one frame of one door, there's two people, there's a water buffalo, there's a... what's your first impression? What is that thing? Looks like a stegosaurus, doesn't it? Now, it's not perfect. His head's a little odd. He's got a thing sticking up. Maybe that's trying to depict a frill with a spike on it. I don't know, but wow. The first impression is that looks like a stegosaur. Is it? If it is, then people knew what dinosaurs looked like. They would have to have seen them, or at least had a cultural memory close enough that someone could depict it accurately. But that can't possibly be true. Charles Darwin and evolutionists tell us that there was once an age of dinosaurs. There were no people, there were no mammals, there were no birds, there were no grasses. And the world was dominated by dinosaurs. Happily, this is absolutely wrong. Everything I just told you was not true. There are mammals. I just said a little while ago, as many species of mammals as we have species of dinosaurs. There were tons of birds. Even better, there were grasses. Now, when I was in school, I was taught that grasses didn't evolve until 35 million years ago. That's 30 million years after the extinction of the dinosaur in the evolutionary time frame. That means grasses are modern, but grasses cover the world. Well, lo and behold, we have, strangely, thousands upon thousands of petrified dinosaur dung piles. You ever go out in the field and like trip over a petrified cow mess? That stuff doesn't last for a long time. How do you petrify that? It's goop. And if it rains, it's gone. Thank God. Sorry, I sound a little sacrilegious. I shouldn't have said that. Why do we have thousands of petrified dinosaur dungs? It's because they were buried rapidly and petrified before they rotted away. There's no other way to do that. But when scientists started studying this, what a great job. What do you study? They started cutting them in half and polishing them, and then looking at them under a microscope. And lo and behold, all of the families of grasses are being eaten by dinosaurs. We see it in their dung. And yet they're not anywhere else in the fossil record. You realize the fossil record is fickle and spotty, right? There are things that are preserved and things that aren't preserved. So if something's not preserved, you can't know it wasn't there. You just know it's not preserved. Well, now we know, because there's one odd way of preservation, that landscape should have been covered with grasses. But I remember as a young man, I was absolutely 100% convinced that evolution was true. It was scientific. You can't doubt it. Evolution is a fact, I would have said. I would have used something like this. This is the family tree of dinosaurs. Look at that. It goes all the way back to a common ancestor at the bottom. Come on, isn't that evidence of evolution? Isn't that exactly what evolution predicts? No. Because look what happens when you cover up everything they don't actually know. Oh. You've heard of the missing link, right, between man and monkeys? No, there's missing links between almost every group of animal and almost every other group of animal throughout the entire fossil record. That is what the fossil record looks like. Now, granted, there's an evolutionary assumption here of time on the left. Look, there's a Cretaceous, there's a Jurassic, there's a Triassic. Oh, wait a second. You've seen Jurassic Park, right? Doesn't it bug you that all those animals are Cretaceous? It does now. Oh, man, Cretaceous Park. Come on, man. Those aren't Jurassic dinosaurs. Anyway, whatever. Sorry. It's really hard for me to watch science and science fiction. I love it, but at the same time, I cringe a lot. Okay. That's the fossil record. Buried with dinosaurs, as I said earlier, lots of mammals. Look, there's a Mesozoic squirrel. Looks like a flying squirrel. There's a platypus. Not a platypus-like creature, but a platypus. Those are platypus teeth, and you see the groove on the jaw? That's for the giant nerve that runs to the electrosensory bill of the platypus. Now, the only difference here between platypuses today and then is that guy was twice as big as the ones today. That's not surprising. There used to be 6-foot-tall penguins. Why? The bigger you are, the more likely you are to go extinct. All species should be driving towards smaller sizes over time. And that's actually, we see a lot of that in the fossil record, things getting smaller. The funny thing about this, now look at the dates here. Now, I don't think the Earth is more than, 6,000, 6,500 years old, something like that. Evolutionists say dinosaurs died out 60 million years ago. That means a platypus lived with dinosaurs the entire time dinosaurs were around. They say this jaw was from 120 million years ago. And yet, it's a platypus. It must have evolved before that. Here's a badger-like creature, Rapenomamus robustus. Love that name. In his belly was a baby Psittacosaurus. So on the morning of Noah's flood, that mammal ate a dinosaur for breakfast. There's a beaver-like creature, supposedly 100 million years before the dinosaurs went extinct. They were fully fledged mammals that look pretty much like beavers swimming around in the waters. The guy, this is a new one, the one on the right here. It's the size of a hedgehog, and hedgehogs have very typical hair. No animal on Earth has hair like a hedgehog, except the hedgehog. That fossil is the size and shape of a hedgehog and has hairs like a hedgehog. So those cute little hedgehogs live with dinosaurs for 60 million years and haven't changed till today. You've probably seen, I should put a picture in here. You've probably seen a picture of Dimetrodon. It's a squat little alligator-like thing with a big sail on his back. Yeah, that's Triassic. That's way back early in the record. But that is called a mammal-like reptile. The evolutionists have said, well, yeah, these mammal-like reptiles are the halfway point between mammals and reptiles. Well, the problem is, here's a picture of a mammal-like reptile. Another one. And when they found all these bones, they said, wait a minute, those are mammal teeth. That's a mammal backbone, mammal arms and legs, and a mammal tail. It's a fully fledged mammal. It's not transitional. It's a mammal. But based on where they said it, they concluded that mammals must have originated at least in the late Triassic. When is that? So mammals must have lived with dinosaurs the entire time that dinosaurs lived. That's funny. I've always believed that. Now look where I put mammals and birds here. Oh, by the way, these red lines, that's the same thing as that evolutionary tree I showed you earlier. I drew red lines on everything, and I just moved it off to the left just so I can compact it, so I can show you where mammals and birds were. When I was in graduate school even, I was taught that mammals did not evolve till late in the dinosaur era, little mouse-like creatures, rodent sort of things. And after the mammals died off, after the dinosaurs died off, the mammals took over the world and became people and wombats and cougars and things like that. I was also taught that birds did not exist until very late in the era of dinosaurs. They evolved from dinosaurs, and then after dinosaurs died out, birds radiated and became things like, partridges and other birds. Does this sound like an evolutionary story to you? Are you familiar with this picture? Well, great. I'm about to show you that it's absolutely wrong. Because we found lots of birds buried with dinosaurs. This is Confuciusornis, supposedly 130 million years ago. Now think of the evolutionary picture here. That's 55 million years with dinosaurs. It has feathers. Can you see the feathers? That black smudge in the left rock there, those are feathers. Those two things sticking off the bottom of the animal. Okay, the difference between a bird and a reptile. Reptiles have bony tails, like your Labrador. When your dog is happy, he's swinging his tail. You don't want to get next to him. Why? Because it crack you across your knee. Oh, man, that hurt. Get out of here, dumb dog. Why does it hurt? Because there's bones in the tail. Reptiles have long, bony tails. Birds don't. You've eaten chicken. What's on the rear end of a chicken? This is a little nub. It's called a pygostyle. It's a couple of bones. And if a bird has a tail, it's feathers sticking off of that little thing. That animal has a pygostyle and long, symmetrical tail feathers. He's got claws in his wings, though. Well, a lot of ancient birds had claws in their wings. But so does the modern Hoatzin that lives in South America. Hoatzin also has a flat breastbone. It's a weird bird. You've eaten chicken and turkey. What do you do when you have to get the white meat off the animal? There's a thing that sticks up out of the rib cage, right? You kind of have to dig it out. That keel is an anchor point for the muscle, which makes a triangle, which gives the bird mechanical advantage. It helps him fly because the muscle has something to pull against. You would never be able to fly. You would never do it. You don't have the musculature. But strangely, this modern bird also has a flat breastbone. It flies perfectly fine. A lot of diversity in the bird record here. Here's Hongshanornis longcresta, supposedly 125 million years ago. He lived. He has a beak. You see the bottom of that brown smudge in the bottom, that smile? That looks like the color of his tail feathers. That's cool. Here's Anchiornis huxleyi. Can you see the feathers? Can feathers be preserved in rocks? Now, the reason this fossil is specifically important is because when they split the rock in half, that's the left and right hand half of the same fossil. National Geographic, back around the year 2000 or so, they had a front page article of a fully feathered reptile. That was a forgery. They spent millions of dollars buying this fossil, and they put it on their cover. But some paleontologists were skeptical. So they went back to the same quarry where that fossil was found, and they dug through the rubble pile until they found the other half of the fossil. And they said, oh, it doesn't match. Somebody had broken a fossil in half and glued a lizard fossil, reptile fossil, and a bird fossil together. Because they knew they could make money, and National Geographic bought it because they wanted to prove that dinosaurs had feathers. Here's I don't even want to try to pronounce that. Yeah, well, Corellus spinia multidonta. Now, can you see the feathers? Yeah, multidonta means many teeth. Yeah, some ancient birds had teeth also. But looking at the fossil record here, we can do this with the mammals. We can do this with the birds. Now, why do I have a question mark on birds? It's because we don't have many of them. Because most all the bird fossils we found come from a specific place in China. In fact, a specific quarry in China. In fact, that's here. Let me skip ahead a little bit. Almost all of the feathered dinosaur fossils we found come from this place. And the same scientist has his name on all of the papers. Excuse me if I get my little skeptical filter out here. That is not a good recipe for good science. I'm not sure that I trust it. But going back to the feathered idea, did dinosaurs have feathers? Well, here's Sinosauropteryx. You see the brown fuzz in his back? That was the poster child of the feathered dinosaurs. The first one found and trumpeted, look, dinosaurs had feathers, you creationists are wrong. Evolution is true. And then years after this paper was published describing this fossil, some paleontologists went back and they said, wait a second, we can see the skin of the animal in the fossil, and that brown fuzz is underneath the skin. And then I quote, it is obvious to anyone who looks. Why was it not obvious to the first scientists who looked? Because they wanted to prove a point. My friends, I'm sorry, but scientists are just as biased and bigoted as anybody else. We try not to appear that way, but people are people, especially when there's money involved. Because if you discover a world-class fossil like this, your academic record is secure, and you'll be promoted, and you'll get book things and magazines, and you'll appear on TV, and you'll get lots and lots of money. And paleontology, sadly, has a record of people searching for the limelight and obtaining it when they find something amazing. Well, here's something amazing. This is a brand new paper. They're asking, okay, did dinosaurs have feathers? Well, let's look at all the skin fossils of dinosaurs. Did you know we have skin fossils? Yeah, lots and lots of them. Well, here's 3 different skin fossils from Tyrannosaurus rex, and lo and behold, 3 different places on the body. All we see are scales. They didn't have feathers. Showed you that one already. Let me skip over that then. I know that this can be confusing. And I'm going to tell you something that may shock you. I don't care if dinosaurs have feathers or not. I want to know, because I'm a scientist, I'm a nerd, I like to know stuff. But the Bible does not say dinosaurs did not have feathers. I'll take it either way. I'm not convinced they had feathers. I see a lot of evidence, you know what? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I know birds in the fossil record had feathers. That's absolutely clear. Dinosaurs? Maybe. But you know, it doesn't matter. My faith is not challenged by this because of something more important. Because you see, if the millions of years doesn't exist, it doesn't matter if dinosaurs have feathers or not. There's no time for evolution to happen. What if I could show you evidence the millions of years cannot possibly exist? If that is true, then I'm free to experiment and with fossils and look at fossils and learn about fossils without saying, oh, evolution must be true. Because no millions of years, no evolution. Okay? These are electron microscopic images of the inside of a Triceratops horn that was found in Montana, published in an evolutionary paper by 2 creationists. I know both of these men, Armitage and Anderson. Armitage was summarily fired, and Anderson happens to be the laboratory director of the Institute of the Creation Research Society. So he didn't get fired, but his name is mud now. But what they did is they pulled up this dinosaur fossil, and they looked at it under electron microscope. You know what? Those top 2 pictures, those are delicate bone structures that turn to powder over time. And yet they're still intact. And an animal supposedly died 67 million years ago or something like that. The middle on the right, those 2 blobs with the spikes, those are osteoblasts, bone cells. Those little spikes tend to fall off over time. In fact, when you look at a dead thing, you say, oh, this thing's been dead for 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, if you can even find osteocytes after 100 years based on their condition. This is not supposed to be true. You can't leave a ham sandwich on a counter for a week before it starts turning green. Could you bury a pig in your backyard and expect to find anything left after even 1,000 years? How about millions of years? If you don't petrify that thing, it's not going to last for millions of years. In fact, I think that this guy died in Noah's flood a little more than 4,500 years ago. I am shocked that there's still material in this bone, not petrified and not decayed. I am absolutely shocked. And yet it's there, which means I'm really happy. How does the evolutionist deal with this? Here's an evolutionist, discovered amazing material inside a Tyrannosaurus rex leg bone. Now, let me tell you a secret. It still stinks. Okay, how many of you saw the movie The Mummy? Remember when they opened up the sarcophagus and the guy, oh, it's still gooey. Remember that? Why was he surprised that a mummy inside a sarcophagus in the desert wouldn't be dry? Because it should have dried out. It was a shock. It shouldn't be. Ooh, it's still smelly. things don't rot for millions of years. There's a science that's called taphonomy. It's the science of studying things that rot. We've been doing it for a very long time. We know the rate of degradation of proteins, DNA, cellular things. We know. We've been studying it for a long time. And yet this Tyrannosaurus rex material is flexible. There's meat, blood vessels, red blood cells. By the way, reptiles have a nucleus in their red blood cells, just like that thing. That's not human blood because we don't have any nuclei in our red blood cells. Oh my. The same laboratory produced this. Those are cells that were isolated from a dinosaur fossil. Oh my, that means it's not petrified. They stain that cell with a stain that I've used in the laboratory. It's called DAPI. It's a stain that absorbs into DNA and only works if you have a coil of DNA, which means you need a long piece of DNA because short pieces of DNA don't form a coil. And it lit up in green what looks like a specific place in the cell. Oh, we would call that the nucleus, which means that intracellular compartments are still intact, which also means the DNA is still intact. Wait a second. Now, that's my field now. I'm the geneticist here. DNA does not last for millions of years, period. You cannot get it to last long time. It doesn't work that way. In fact, when they sequenced the Neanderthal genome, the longest piece of DNA they found was 50 letters. And they think that thing only died off, 10, 20,000 years ago. We're talking about chromosomes 250 million letters long, broken up into pieces no more than 50 letters. Over tens of thousands of years. I don't think they're tens of thousands of years old, by the way. It's just an evolutionary number I threw at you. You're okay with that? I'll talk about Neanderthal in my next talk anyway. There's no way the DNA would last that long. But we know that bacteria have DNA, right? So what if that's a bacteria living inside the dinosaur bone? Okay, well, that's what the two right-hand pictures are for. They also stain some cells with a stain that grabs onto a protein that bacteria do not have. But you have it, and reptiles have it. It's called a histone. It's a protein DNA wraps around inside your nucleus. And look at that. It lit up what looks like a nucleus. Do you know what that means? That means there's excellent evidence that DNA is still inside non-petrified, non-decayed cells inside non-petrified and non-decayed bones of dinosaurs. That means that millions of years is not true. I'm going to talk about carbon-14 in my next talk, but let me just throw you a little aside here. Laboratories, in fact, the University of Georgia here, their carbon-14 dating lab has been dating dinosaur bones. But my friends who've been collecting it have been labeling it bison because they wouldn't accept a dinosaur specimen. So is that lying? How else are you going to get someone to date your dinosaur bone? They wouldn't do it otherwise. Guess what? Dinosaur bones have carbon-14 in them. Enough carbon-14 to measure. But if the entire Earth was made of 100% carbon-14, the entire Earth, down to the last atom, would disintegrate in less than 1 million years. Nothing with carbon-14 in it can be millions of years old. So intact material, intact DNA, intact cells, carbon-14, everything is screaming that dinosaurs here really are not what the evolutionists have been trying to tell us all these years. So let me summarize. What have we learned? I actually skipped over a couple of these points, so it'll be imperfect, but dinosaurs tell us about God's creativity. When we look at what he made, it is nothing short of amazing. The engineering that must have gone into a sauropod. Shocking. We can't build things like that. Even made of titanium, we couldn't build something like that. And of course, that thing also can reproduce itself. Wow, what an amazing thing. But dinosaurs, even though they're originally created as herbivores, we know some did leave. We know there's lots of suffering, death, carnivory, broken stuff in the fossil record. Dinosaurs tell us about the fall, a world that was initially created good and got corrupted afterwards. Dinosaurs also tell us about Noah's flood because we see lots of evidence of land animals that were drowned. There's a lot of other information I wasn't able to share with you because of time. But dinosaurs also tell us about God's judgment, because he sent the watery catastrophe onto this earth. as a judgment on wickedness. But they also tell us about God's providence. Because it does look like dinosaurs did survive Noah's flood and lived with man for at least a while afterwards. I think they're extinct now, which is part of the judgment, but God provided a way of escape, specifically for Noah. Just like he provides a way of escape for us today through Christ, which is the way to escape the final judgment. More about that in my next talk also. But if you put all those things together, actually, dinosaurs also tell us about the gospel. I didn't do such a great job connecting all these dots, but you can use this topic when people are saying, oh, you believe the Bible, what about dinosaurs? I won't name one of my family members, when I was done with a talk, I should say, it was my mother. She said, what about dinosaurs? That's a huge sticking point, isn't it? What about millions of years? What about evolution? What about all this stuff that everyone has been told proves evolution is true? We can use this topic to whittle down those stumbling blocks that people have. Because the point here is not to talk about science. The point here is to talk about Jesus Christ. And this is a bully pulpit. There are so many amazing things that we can talk about that shout out about our Creator, who's good and kind and loving, and we can use it to just get into Christianity very easily. If you want more information, let me point you to a couple of things here. First of all, there's a very interesting book, Untold Secrets of Planet Earth, Dire Dragons. The author went all over the world looking at artwork of dragons. And he discovered that there's 4 different types of scales on dinosaurs. All 4 of those types of scales are represented in the ancient artwork. Well, that's odd. And he got all these pictures of these carvings or drawings or whatever it was about a dragon. And then he had an artist draw a picture of a known species of dinosaur in the same pose as you see in the artwork. That's cool. I learned a lot of stuff in that. There's another book with the same sort of cover. It's called Untold Secrets of Planet Earth, Flood Fossils. And I tell you what, I learned more about fossilization of fossils in that book than anything else I've read. Did you know we have all of these petrified trees that are oval, not round? Why are they oval? Because they were buried before they were petrified and then crushed by a massive amount of material that built up on them very rapidly, which led to the fossilization process. That's just really cool stuff. Here's an interesting little book, Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb. We have a brand new one next to it, Exploring Dinosaurs with Mr. Hibb. There's a little cricket character. It's really engaging. Designed for 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, that kind of a range. Kids are interested in science and like to read and like to look at pictures. And they're asking and answering the types of questions that children growing up in today's culture are asking, and we try to answer them in a biblical way. You should take a look at that. That's really interesting. Now, I'm going to end you with this. I'm in my next talk, and the talk tonight, and the talk on Wednesday with the same verse. 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. Now, I try to be funny occasionally, but I tried real hard not to be snarky. I don't like being sarcastic. I don't like being caustic. We have a lot of evidence on our side. We don't have to be jerks about it. And we're commanded here to answer people respectfully. And how can I laugh at an evolutionist when I used to be one? What right do I have to say, oh, that's stupid, how can you believe that? Now, I tend to default to that mode, and I shouldn't do that. I also get really angry when people yell at me. I'm sorry, I got a fiery temper, and I just want to pop people in the nose when they're yelling at me. That's just the way it is, and I don't do that. Well, one reason is because of the transforming power of Christ. I should be reflecting Christ in my words and in my actions. Do I do a good job? No. Do I try? Yes. 1 Peter 3:15 points us in that direction. Let's pray.